The rich woman snubbed the young man in the elevator, but his father owned the building. Amanda Richardson adjusted the golden strap of her purse on her shoulder as she waited for the elevator in the lobby of the most luxurious building on the Upper East Side. At 32, she had built a reputation as a successful businesswoman in the cosmetics market, always impeccable in her designer suits and with a posture that intimidated even the most confident. Her life was measured in figures, million-dollar contracts, and the impression she made on the important people of New York City. When the elevator doors opened, she found two men already inside the cab. One of them, Marcus Johnson, was a 45-year-old black lawyer whom she vaguely recognized from the society pages, wearing an impeccable suit that showcased his professional success. Next to him was Ethan Collins, a 26-year-old young man with brown hair, wearing a simple shirt and faded jeans, with an appearance that screamed simplicity amid the luxury of that environment. Amanda entered the elevator and immediately positioned herself as far away from Ethan as possible, as if his presence could contaminate the refined air she breathed. Her eyes quickly scanned his clothes, from the worn-out sneakers to the t-shirt that had clearly seen better days. Marcus observed the silent tension that settled in the small cab, recognizing the woman's obvious discomfort. 20th floor? Amanda said to Marcus, completely ignoring Ethan's existence. Same destination, Marcus replied politely, noticing how she directed her speech only to him. Ethan remained silent, accustomed to that kind of treatment. His fingers nervously played with the keys in his pocket as he watched the numbers rising on the display. He knew that expression of disdain well. He had grown up seeing his mother receive the same looks when she cleaned the offices of the city's rich. "Excuse me, but are you sure you're on the right floor?" Amanda finally addressed Ethan, her voice laden with a forced politeness that barely disguised the prejudice. "This floor is only for executive offices." "I know where I'm going," Ethan replied calmly, without looking up. Amanda exchanged a meaningful glance with Marcus, as if expecting him to share her silent indignation. The lawyer, however, maintained a neutral expression, having learned over the years not to judge people by their appearance. His own journey had been marked by moments when his competence was questioned before he even opened his mouth. The elevator stopped on the 15th floor, and two more people entered. Amanda took advantage of the movement to move even further away from Ethan, pressing herself against the side wall. The young man noticed the movement, and a bitter smile crossed his lips. He had spent the last few months frequenting that building, but always received the same treatment. "How absurd," Amanda murmured to Marcus, low enough for only him to hear, but loud enough for Ethan to catch a few words. "The security in this building is a disgrace. Anyone can get in here these days." Marcus moved uncomfortably, not responding to the comment. He had built his career defending discrimination cases and recognized the signs when he saw them. Ethan kept his gaze fixed on the elevator numbers, but Marcus noticed how his shoulders tensed at the comment. When they finally reached the 20th floor, Amanda hurried out, her heels echoing in the marble hallway. Marcus followed more slowly, while Ethan remained in the elevator for a few extra seconds, as if he needed a moment to recompose himself. When he finally exited, he followed in the same direction as the other two. Amanda stopped abruptly. When she realized Ethan was still behind them, she turned with a look of growing alarm, as if finally confirming her worst suspicions about the young man's intentions. "Look, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going to call security," she said, already taking her phone from her purse. "That won't be necessary," Ethan replied calmly, taking a card from his pocket. "I have a meeting scheduled." Amanda examined the card with skepticism, as if it were an obvious forgery. It was a simple card, without the luxurious finishes she was used to seeing in the corporate world. The name Ethan Collins was printed in basic letters, along with a phone number. "A meeting with whom?" she insisted, still suspicious. "With the office of Coleman and Associates," Ethan answered, putting the card back in his pocket. The name made Amanda stop. Coleman and Associates was one of the most respected law firms in New York City, known for representing large corporations and family fortunes. She herself had tried to hire their services in the past, but the waiting list was endless. Marcus observed the interaction with growing interest, He knew the firm Coleman and Associates and knew they didn't schedule meetings lightly. If Ethan had an appointment there was more to the story than met the eye. You? With Coleman and Associates? Amanda laughed, a humorless sound. They don't just take anyone who shows up at the door. I'm not just anyone, Ethan said simply, continuing to walk down the hallway. Amanda stood still for a moment, processing the confidence in his voice. There was something in the way he spoke that made her question her first impressions. Marcus took advantage of her moment of hesitation to approach Ethan. Sorry for the curiosity, but may I ask what the meeting is about? Marcus asked politely. I'm a lawyer too, and I know the people at Coleman and Associates well. Inheritance matters, Ethan replied, stopping in front of the door with the firm's golden plaque. My family situation is complicated. Before anyone could ask more questions, the door opened and an elegant secretary appeared. She greeted Ethan by name with familiarity, as if she already knew him from previous visits. Amanda felt her certainties begin to waver. Mr. Collins, Dr. Coleman is waiting for you, the secretary said with a professional smile. Please follow me. Ethan entered the office without looking back, leaving Amanda and Marcus standing in the hallway. The woman stared at the closed door for several seconds, as if trying to decipher a complex puzzle. Her mind worked quickly, trying to fit the pieces of a situation that made no sense to her. Interesting, murmured Marcus. Appearances can really be deceiving. It can't be what it seems, said Amanda, more to herself than to him. It's probably some kind of scam. Marcus looked at her with an expression that mixed surprise and disappointment. He had hoped the obvious evidence that she was wrong about Ethan would make her reconsider her judgment, but apparently she preferred to invent alternative explanations rather than admit her prejudice. Or maybe you've misjudged the situation from the start, he suggested gently. Amanda turned to him with a defensive expression. She wasn't used to being contradicted, especially by someone she had just met. Her professional success had been built on her ability to read people quickly and make decisions based on those first impressions. I know how to recognize people from my world, she said with a confidence she didn't fully feel. That young man doesn't belong here. And who decides who belongs where? Asked Marcus, his voice maintaining a calm tone, but carrying a weight that made Amanda reconsider her words. The question echoed in the silent hallway, creating a moment of tension that neither of them knew exactly how to break. Amanda was used to having her opinions accepted without question, especially when it came to evaluating people's social suitability. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're just getting started. Now, back to the story. Before she could answer, another door opened in the hallway and an older man appeared. It was Dr. Benjamin Coleman, the senior partner of the firm, known throughout the city for his discretion and for representing some of the most influential families in the United States. His immediate presence in the hallway was unusual, as he rarely got personally involved in receptions. Mr. Collins is in a meeting with me, said Dr. Coleman, addressing Amanda and Marcus vaguely, but with a tone that made it clear questions were not welcome. Very delicate matters of family succession. Amanda felt her legs weaken slightly. Dr. Coleman was not known for wasting time on unimportant people. If he was personally involved in Ethan's case, it meant there was much more at stake than she had imagined. Dr. Coleman, Marcus introduced himself, extending his hand. Marcus Johnson, from Johnson & Partners. It's a real pleasure to meet you in person. Johnson, said Dr. Coleman, acknowledging the name. I've heard about your work. Very solid. The professional validation created an instant connection between the two men, leaving Amanda momentarily outside the conversation. She observed how Marcus was treated with immediate respect, contrasting painfully with the way she had treated Ethan just minutes before. If I may ask, Marcus said carefully, does the case involve one of the major families in the real estate sector? Dr. Coleman hesitated for a moment, weighing how much he could reveal. His expression suggested the question had touched on something significant. Let's say it does, he finally replied, and that the implications may surprise a lot of people who think they know the whole story. Amanda took a step closer, unable to contain her curiosity. The mention of the real estate sector had piqued her professional interest, as her company maintained contracts with several major developers in the city. "Are we talking about significant changes in the market?" she asked, trying to insert herself into the conversation with a professional approach. Dr. Coleman looked at her for a moment, as if sizing her up. There was something in his expression that suggested he had witnessed the interaction in the elevator, or at least heard comments about it. "Changes, certainly," he said, "but perhaps not the kind you imagine. Sometimes the biggest transformations come from where we least expect them." At that moment, the office door opened again, and Ethan came out, carrying a document folder. His expression was serious, as if he had just received information that fundamentally changed his perspective on something important. "Dr. Coleman, thank you for the guidance," Ethan said respectfully. "I'm going to need a few days to process all of this." Of course," replied the lawyer. "And remember, absolute discretion until we take the next steps. These situations require great care." Amanda and Marcus watched the exchange with growing fascination. There was a formality in the interaction that suggested a long-standing relationship and matters of extreme importance. Ethan carefully put the documents away in his folder, as if they were extremely valuable. "Mr. Collins," Dr. Coleman continued, "I would like to suggest you consider hiring additional legal counsel for the next steps. This type of situation can generate resistance." "I understand," said Ethan, his eyes briefly meeting Amanda's before turning back to the lawyer. "I need to be prepared for all possibilities." The mention of resistance created a palpable tension in the hallway. Amanda perceived she was in the middle of something much bigger than she had imagined, and her curiosity began to overcome her initial prejudice. When Ethan headed to the elevator, Amanda found herself in a dilemma. Part of her wanted to maintain the distance she had established, but another part was consumed by the need to understand what she had just witnessed. Marcus, noticing her internal struggle, made the decision for her. "Mr. Collins," he called out, reaching Ethan before the elevator arrived. "If it's not too intrusive, I'd like to offer you my card. Succession cases can be complex." Ethan accepted the card and examined it briefly. There was gratitude in his eyes, as if he had finally found someone willing to treat him with professional respect. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I might really need some advice in the coming days." Amanda approached hesitantly, fighting her pride. "I would like to apologize for the misunderstanding in the elevator." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, his eyes revealing a mixture of surprise and something that could be interpreted as forgiveness. He had expected many different reactions, but an apology from Amanda was not among them. "It's okay," he finally said. "I'm used to it." The simplicity of the response hit Amanda harder than any accusation could have. "I'm used to it," revealed a history of repeated disrespect that she had perpetuated without a second thought. The realization made her feel smaller than she had ever felt in her adult life. The elevator arrived, and the three of them entered together. But this time the dynamic had completely changed. Amanda did not move away from Ethan, and the silence that settled was contemplative rather than tense. Each was processing the events of the last few minutes and their implications. "May I ask how long you've been coming to this building?" Amanda finally broke the silence, her voice much more humble than before. 3 months, Ethan replied, "since I found out about my family's situation." 3 months, she repeated, realizing she had wrongly assumed it was his first time there. "And have I behaved badly since the first day?" "Not just you," Ethan said without bitterness. "Most people have the same reaction. I understand. My clothes don't fit in with this environment." Marcus observed the conversation with interest. There was a maturity in Ethan that contrasted with his youthful appearance, as if he had learned early on to navigate different worlds and accept people's limited perceptions. "But that doesn't make it right," said Amanda, surprising herself with her honesty. "I pride myself on being a good judge of character in business, but clearly my skills have serious limitations." "We all have biases," Marcus offered diplomatically. "The important thing is to recognize them and work to overcome them." Ethan nodded, appreciating the wisdom in Marcus's observation. His own prejudices about wealthy people had been challenged during those 3 months of meetings, discovering that not everyone matched the stereotypes he had developed. When they reached the ground floor, none of the three made a move to leave immediately. There was a sense of an unfinished conversation, as if the minutes in the elevator had created an unexpected connection that none of them wanted to break abruptly. "Mr. Collins," said Amanda, struggling with words she wasn't used to saying, "if you ever want to talk about, well, about business or anything, my card is always available." She extended an elegant card, and Ethan accepted it with a thoughtful expression. The gesture represented much more than a simple exchange of professional information. It was an acknowledgement of humanity that had been denied for months. "Thank you," he said, carefully placing the card in his shirt pocket. "I might really need some different perspectives in the coming times." When they finally stepped out of the elevator, they each went their separate ways. But something fundamental had shifted. Amanda walked to her car with slower steps than usual, her mind filled with questions she couldn't easily answer. That evening she found herself researching the Coleman & Associates firm and its most famous cases. Most involved inheritance disputes among powerful families, matters that usually stayed out of the public eye until significant decisions were made. Meanwhile, Ethan returned to his small apartment in Soho, a stark contrast to the luxurious environments he had been in during the day. He spread the documents he had received on the kitchen table and began studying them carefully, knowing his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet fully comprehend. Marcus, for his part, made a few discreet calls to colleagues who knew the inner workings of the New York City real estate market. The clues he had picked up in his conversation with Dr. Coleman intrigued him professionally, and he suspected he was about to witness one of the biggest power shifts in the industry in years. The three of them didn't know their destinies would intertwine again very soon, in ways none of them could predict. The seeds planted in that chance meeting in the elevator were about to sprout into a story that would change not only their individual lives, but also the power dynamics of one of the most important markets in New York City. The next morning, Amanda arrived at her office with a slightly different perspective. For the first time in years, she found herself questioning some of the assumptions she had made about people based on their appearance. The unshakable confidence that had always characterized her was slightly shaken, creating space for reflections she normally avoided. Her assistant, Jessica, noticed the subtle change in her behavior. Amanda usually arrived at the office with focused energy and specific instructions, but this morning she seemed distracted, as if processing something important. "Ms. Richardson, the meeting with the marketing team has been rescheduled for 10 o'clock, Jessica informed her, observing how Amanda only nodded distractedly. "Jessica," Amanda said suddenly, "do you believe it's possible to misjudge a person completely based on a first impression?" The question surprised the assistant, who had worked with Amanda for 3 years and had never seen her question her ability to assess people. It was well known in the office that the businesswoman prided herself on her ability to quickly read people. "Well," Jessica replied carefully, "I think we all make hasty judgments sometimes." "Why?" Amanda was silent for a moment, recalling the confidence in Ethan's voice when he said, "I'm not just anybody." There was something in that statement that kept echoing in her mind, suggesting layers of history she had completely missed. "I was just thinking about perceptions," she said finally. "Sometimes we think we know everything about a situation, but we only see the surface." Meanwhile, Ethan woke up early in his modest apartment, but this time with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in months. The documents he had received from Dr. Coleman contained information that completely changed his understanding of his family and his place in the world. He had grown up believing he was the son of a construction worker who had abandoned the family when he was a child. His mother, Grace, had worked as a housekeeper her entire life to support him, never revealing details about his father beyond saying he wasn't a family man. Now, looking at the certificates and legal documents spread across his desk, Ethan was discovering that his family history was far more complex than he had ever imagined. His father wasn't a missing laborer, but rather William Collins, one of the most powerful real estate developers in New York City. The revelation had come through an investigation that Dr. Richardson was conducting to resolve succession issues within William Collins's real estate empire. The businessman, now 72, had built his fortune through a series of successful ventures, but his personal life had been marked by secrets and complicated relationships. Grace had been much more than an employee in William's life. They had maintained a secret relationship for several years until she became pregnant. Social pressures and business interests had forced William to choose between acknowledging his son and maintaining his position in the New York City business elite. The choice he had made decades earlier was now coming back to confront him through a series of legal investigations into the legitimacy of his succession. Other members of the Collins family had hired investigators to question potential unrecognized heirs, inadvertently discovering Ethan's existence. Dr. Richardson had been hired by William to discreetly resolve the situation, but the succession laws were clear. Ethan had legitimate rights to the inheritance, regardless of formal acknowledgement or not. The question now was how to proceed without creating a scandal that could destroy decades of reputation building. Ethan finished reviewing the documents and prepared for another day of meetings. He knew the coming weeks would be crucial in defining not only his financial future, but also his identity and his place in the world. The simple life he had known was coming to an end, but he still didn't know exactly what would come next. At that very moment, in another part of the city, William Collins was in his penthouse on the Upper West Side, contemplating a decision he had postponed for over 20 years. At 72, he had built a real estate empire that included some of the most iconic developments in New York, but his greatest achievement had always been tarnished by the regret of not having acknowledged his son. His wife, Catherine, had passed away 3 years earlier, taking with her the main obstacle to him rectifying the mistakes of the past. His other 2 children, Richard and Elizabeth, had grown up vaguely aware of the existence of a half-brother, but had never pressed for details. Now, with the legal investigations forcing the situation toward a resolution, William found himself in a position where he could no longer avoid confronting the consequences of his past choices. Dr. Richardson had been clear. Ethan wasn't seeking money or recognition. Circumstances had simply revealed a truth that could no longer be ignored. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Dr. Richardson with updates about the previous day's meeting. "William, I have to tell you, the young man made a good impression," said the lawyer. "He's intelligent, respectful, and seems to have a mature understanding of the situation. He showed no signs of being interested in causing trouble." "And what about the public exposure?" asked William, his voice betraying the worry that had dominated his thoughts. "For now, everything remains discreet. But you know these situations have a life of their own. The longer we wait to make a decision, the greater the chance others will find out, and the situation slips from our control." William sighed, knowing Dr. Richardson was right. Decades of business experience had taught him that problems rarely solve themselves, and that delayed decisions usually became more complicated with time. "Schedule a meeting," he finally said. "It's time to meet my son." While these conversations were happening in the highest circles of New York City society, Amanda was preparing for a work meeting that she didn't know would completely change her perspective on recent events. Her firm had been invited to present a proposal for a new luxury product line, and the client was a company from the Collins Group. When she arrived at the meeting address, she discovered it was the same building where she had met Ethan the day before. The coincidence made her hesitate for a moment in the lobby, recalling their awkward interaction in the elevator. The elevator arrived, and to her surprise, Marcus was inside, apparently heading to the same floor. They greeted each other with the familiarity of people who had shared a significant, albeit brief, experience. "Meeting with the Collins Group?" asked Marcus, noticing the presentation folder she was carrying. "Yes," replied Amanda. "And you?" "Legal consultation for a new acquisition," he said. "It seems we'll be bumping into each other often in this building." They laughed, but the mention of the Collins Group made Amanda remember Dr. Coleman's words about significant changes in the real estate sector. She began to wonder if there were connections between the events of the previous day that she hadn't noticed. When they reached the meeting floor, they discovered they were waiting in the same reception area. The secretary informed them that there would be a slight delay as a previous meeting was running longer than planned. "Dr. Richardson," the secretary said to Amanda, "Mr. Richard Collins asked me to inform you that there may be some unexpected developments in today's presentation. Nothing that affects your proposal, but the context might be slightly different from what was initially briefed." The cryptic remark left Amanda intrigued. In her 10 years working with large corporations, she had learned that unexpected developments usually meant significant changes in the company's structure or strategy. Marcus, who had overheard the comment, exchanged a meaningful look with Amanda. His experience in corporate law told him that something important was happening behind the scenes at the Collins Group, something that likely related to the succession issues Dr. Coleman had mentioned. At that moment, the conference room door opened and Ethan came out, accompanied by an older man who clearly held authority within the organization. Amanda and Marcus were surprised to see him again, especially in a context that suggested a more formal relationship with the company. Ethan saw them and nodded discreetly, but did not approach. There was something different in his posture, a confidence that hadn't been there the day before. The man beside him treated him with a respect that contrasted drastically with the assumptions Amanda had made about his social standing. "Dr. Coleman, Mr. Johnson," the man said, approaching. "I'm Richard Collins. I apologize for the delay, but we've just concluded a very important meeting that may affect all our future plans." Amanda introduced herself and observed how Richard Collins greeted her politely, but his attention was clearly divided. There was a tension in his movements that suggested the previous meeting had been more than just important. It had been transformative. "If I may comment," Richard said, glancing briefly in the direction where Ethan had disappeared, "our company is undergoing some family restructuring that may create interesting opportunities for our business partners." The reference to family restructuring echoed Dr. Richardson's words about succession issues. Amanda began to realize she was at the center of a much larger story than she had imagined, and that Ethan was somehow deeply involved in the developments shaping one of the city's largest real estate companies. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It's a huge help for us who are just starting out. Now back to the story. The meeting that followed was unlike anything Amanda had experienced in her career. Richard Collins was clearly distracted, and several times the conversation was interrupted by urgent phone calls that he answered with a tense expression. Marcus noticed that the matters mentioned quickly on the phone involved legal and family issues. "Dr. Richardson," said Richard when he finally managed to focus completely on the presentation, "your proposal is excellent, but I need to be honest about our current situation. Our company is undergoing structural changes that may affect timelines and priorities in the coming months." "What kind of changes?" asked Amanda, her professional curiosity overriding any consideration of politeness. Richard hesitated, clearly weighing how much he could reveal. He looked at Marcus as if assessing his professional discretion before answering. "Family succession matters," he said finally. "My father is, let's say, re-evaluating some past decisions that affect the company's ownership structure." Marcus leaned forward slightly, recognizing the careful language lawyers use when discussing sensitive issues. Re-evaluating past decisions probably meant that new heirs were being recognized or that succession disputes were being settled. "Would this affect our partnership?" asked Amanda, trying to maintain a professional focus while her mind raced with the implications. "Actually, it could create bigger opportunities," said Richard with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But it could also mean we'll have new decision-makers involved in the process." The phrase, "new decision-makers," echoed in Amanda's mind. She began to connect the pieces: Ethan's meeting with Dr. Richardson, his presence at the Collins Group, the conversation about family restructuring. The possibilities emerging were surprising. After the meeting, Amanda and Marcus met again in the elevator, both processing what they had witnessed. The silence between them was filled with unasked questions and gradually dawning realizations. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Marcus finally asked. "If you're thinking that Ethan might not be just a casual visitor in this building, then yes," Amanda replied. "The pieces fit together in an interesting way," Marcus said thoughtfully. A young man in meetings with Dr. Richardson about inheritance issues, then shows up at a company undergoing family restructuring. Amanda nodded, feeling a mix of curiosity and something that might have been regret. If her suspicions were correct, she had treated very poorly someone who was about to become one of the most influential people in the New York business world. When they reached the ground floor, they found Ethan waiting in the reception area, apparently waiting for someone. He saw them and approached, his expression more relaxed than they had seen before. "What a coincidence to run into you both here again," he said with a genuine smile. "Work," replied Amanda, still processing her new suspicions about his identity. "And you?" "The same," said Ethan, but there was something in his voice that suggested that work meant something very different for him than she could imagine. Marcus, always direct in his professional approaches, decided to test his theories. "May I ask if your family situation is related to the Collins group?" he said carefully. Ethan looked at him with interest, clearly assessing how much he could reveal. Marcus's question showed a perception that went beyond casual curiosity. "Why do you ask?" he replied, deflecting the question with one of his own. "Professional experience," said Marcus honestly. "Succession situations in family businesses have recognizable patterns." Amanda watched the exchange with growing fascination. There was a verbal dance happening between the two men, each trying to gauge how much the other knew or suspected. "Let's just say my situation is complicated," Ethan said finally, "and it may affect many people in ways they haven't yet imagined." The answer was sufficiently vague to reveal nothing specific, but suggestive enough to confirm the suspicions that were forming. Amanda felt a chill in her stomach as she realized the magnitude of her rudeness the day before. "Ethan," she said, fighting against her pride, "I would really like to talk to you about yesterday. I think I may have been very unfair." He looked at her with surprise. Apologies were not something he expected to receive from people like Amanda, especially not apologies that seemed genuine. "It's not necessary," he said kindly. "As I said, I'm used to it." "But you shouldn't be," she insisted. "And maybe we could talk about it when you have time." The suggestion surprised both Ethan and Marcus. Amanda was not known for admitting mistakes publicly, much less for seeking conversations that could be embarrassing for her. "It would have to be soon," Ethan said thoughtfully. "My situation is going to change significantly in the coming days, and after that, a lot will be different." The reference to imminent changes created an urgency that none of the three had felt before. There was a feeling that they were on the threshold of events that would permanently alter their lives and relationships. "How about tonight?" Marcus suggested impulsively. "I know a discreet place where we can talk without distractions." Ethan hesitated, clearly weighing the implications of getting closer to the people who had witnessed his humiliating treatment. But there was something in Amanda's sincerity and Marcus's practical wisdom that drew him in. "All right," he said finally, "but it may be the last time you meet me as the person you know today." The cryptic remark left them with more questions than answers, but it also created a sense of anticipation that made the meeting irresistible. They exchanged contact information and arranged to meet at a discreet restaurant in the Upper East Side. When they parted, each carried with them a sense that something significant was about to be revealed. Amanda spent the rest of the day distracted, unable to fully concentrate on her professional responsibilities. Marcus cancelled a social engagement to have time to research more about the Collins group and its succession issues. Ethan, in turn, returned home with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. For the first time in months, he considered the possibility of having allies instead of just hostile observers. The prospect of not facing the coming changes alone was both comforting and frightening. That afternoon, William Collins finally made the decision he had postponed for decades. He called Dr. Coleman and instructed him to arrange a formal meeting with Ethan. The time to face the past had arrived, and with it, the need to redefine the future of his family and company. "Benjamin," he said to the lawyer, "I want to meet my son, and I want to do this the right way, even if it's 26 years late." Dr. Richardson received the news with professional satisfaction. He had represented the Collins family for over 15 years and had always known this moment would eventually come. Catherine's death had removed the last emotional obstacle for William, and the legal pressures had created the necessary urgency for action. "I'll arrange something discreet," said Dr. Richardson, "and William, the young man is impressive. You'll be proud." While the formal arrangements were being made in the highest circles, the three protagonists were preparing for a conversation that would fundamentally change their relationships and mutual understanding. None of them knew exactly what to expect, but they all felt they were about to cross a threshold that would not allow for turning back. The restaurant that Marcus had chosen was known for its discretion and sophisticated, yet not ostentatious, clientele. Located on a side street in the Upper East Side, it offered the kind of environment where important conversations could happen without attracting unwanted attention. Amanda arrived first, wearing an outfit more casual than she would normally wear for professional meetings, but still maintaining the elegance that had become her trademark. She had spent the entire afternoon thinking about how to approach the upcoming conversation. Marcus arrived a few minutes later, carrying a discreet briefcase that suggested he had done his homework on the Collins group. His expression was that of someone who had discovered significant information and was eager to share or confirm it. Ethan was the last to arrive, and his appearance made an immediate impact on the other two. Instead of the simple clothes they had grown accustomed to seeing, he was wearing a well-tailored suit that completely transformed his presence. The change was so dramatic that for a moment Amanda didn't recognize him. "Sorry I'm late," he said, approaching the table. "I had a meeting that ran longer than expected." "You look different," observed Amanda, unable to hide her surprise. "Different circumstances require different presentations," replied Ethan with a smile that mixed humor and what might have been nervousness. "Believe it or not, I know how to dress properly when necessary." Marcus studied the transformation with professional interest. In his experience, sudden changes in personal presentation usually coincided with significant shifts in people's social or professional standing. "May I presume your family situation has seen some developments?" he asked diplomatically. Ethan nodded, accepting the water the waiter offered before answering. There was a seriousness in his expression that hadn't been present in their previous meetings. "I'm meeting my father tomorrow," he said simply, "for the first time in 26 years. The silence that followed was loaded with implications. Amanda felt as if the final pieces of a complex puzzle were finally falling into place, creating a picture that was far more significant than she had imagined. "Your father," she began but couldn't finish the question. "William Collins," said Ethan, watching their reactions. "The businessman you probably know from the newspapers and business magazines." The confirmation hit Amanda like a punch to the stomach. She had publicly humiliated the son of one of the most powerful men in New York City, someone whose influence extended far beyond the real estate sector. Marcus, in turn, felt a mixture of professional validation and concern. His suspicions had been confirmed, but the magnitude of the situation was greater than he had anticipated. "Jesus," murmured Amanda, covering her face with her hands. "I didn't know. I never imagined." "How could you have known?" said Ethan gently. "I grew up not knowing who he was. My mother never told me the truth about my paternity." The kindness in his voice made Amanda's remorse even more intense. She had expected anger or petty satisfaction at her humiliation, but found only genuine understanding. "But now you know," said Marcus, always focused on the practical aspects of situations, "and that changes everything." "It changes everything," agreed Ethan, "or at least it has the potential to change. I still don't know how my father will react to meeting me in person." Amanda looked up from her hands, her expression showing a mixture of curiosity and genuine concern that surprised even herself. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," admitted Ethan, with an honesty that caught them all by surprise. "I spent 26 years wondering who my father was, and now that I know, I have no idea how to handle it." The vulnerability in his confession created an unexpected intimacy between the three of them. Amanda found herself genuinely worried about the well-being of someone she had despised just days before, while Marcus felt a protective impulse based on his professional experience with complex family dynamics. "Can I offer a perspective?" said Marcus carefully. In my experience with difficult family meetings, the most important thing is to be authentic. Don't try to be who you think he expects you to be. But what if who I am isn't enough? Asked Ethan, revealing the insecurity he had hidden for months. Then it's not a relationship worth having, said Amanda surprisingly, her voice filled with a conviction that startled her. Any father who can't value a son like you doesn't deserve the privilege of knowing you. Ethan looked at her with genuine gratitude. Coming from someone who had initially judged him so harshly, the validation meant more than she could imagine. "Thank you," he said simply. That means a lot." The conversation that followed was unlike anything any of the three had experienced. Ethan talked about his childhood with Grace, raised believing his father had simply abandoned the family. Amanda shared her own insecurities about judgments and first impressions, revealing a vulnerability she rarely showed to strangers. Marcus offered practical perspectives on navigating powerful families and the unique challenges Ethan would face as a newly recognized heir. His professional experience had given him valuable insights into the dynamics Ethan would need to understand. "One thing you should be prepared for," said Marcus, "is that other family members may not welcome your arrival. Inheritance issues bring out the worst instincts in people." "Richard seemed tense today," observed Amanda, "as if he was dealing with difficult news." "He is," confirmed Ethan. "Finding out you have a half-brother at 40 isn't exactly easy, especially when it can affect significant financial matters." The mention of financial implications brought a practical dimension to the conversation that had been mostly emotional until then. Amanda, with her business experience, immediately understood the complexities involved. "Are you prepared for the changes this might bring to your life?" she asked. "Sudden wealth can be as destabilizing as poverty." "Honestly, no," said Ethan. 2 weeks ago I was worried about paying the rent. Now I'm finding out I might inherit a significant portion of a real estate empire. There's no manual for this kind of transition." "But there is support," offered Marcus, "and if you want, we're here to help you navigate these waters." The offer surprised Ethan. He had expected curiosity or even self-interest, but what he was receiving seemed to be genuine friendship from people he barely knew. "Why would you do this?" he asked honestly. "You owe me nothing." Amanda and Marcus exchanged a look, both recognizing that the question touched on something fundamental about their motivations and character. "Because we all need allies when we face significant changes," Marcus finally said. "And because I need to do what's right," Amanda added, her voice filled with a determination that surprised her. "I misjudged you terribly, and it showed me things about myself that I don't like. Maybe helping you is a way to redeem myself." "It's not about redemption," Ethan said gently. "It's about people being human with each other." The simplicity of the observation resonated deeply with all three. There was something refreshing about reducing complex relationships to their most basic elements: decency, mutual respect, and support during difficult times. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. As the night went on, the conversation deepened into more personal matters. Ethan talked about his aspirations beyond the family situation, revealing an interest in social architecture and community development that he had developed from observing the city's inequalities. "I've always thought that if I had the resources, I'd like to work on housing projects that truly serve people's needs," he said, his eyes lighting up with passion. "Not just building for profit, but creating sustainable communities." The passion in his voice made Amanda reconsider her own professional motivations. When was the last time she had spoken about her work with such genuine enthusiasm? "That would be revolutionary in the industry," Marcus observed. "Traditional family businesses rarely prioritize social impact over profits." "Maybe it's time for some changes," Ethan said, with a determination that surprised even himself. "If I'm going to inherit influence, I want to use it for something that matters." The statement revealed a maturity and sense of responsibility that contrasted dramatically with the first impressions Amanda had formed. She began to understand that she had lost much more than just an opportunity to meet someone interesting. She had lost the chance to recognize someone truly special. "Ethan," she said impulsively, "regardless of what happens tomorrow with your father, I would like to work with you on future projects. My firm has experience in marketing for sustainable development." The offer was so spontaneous that she herself was surprised to make it. It wasn't based on financial interest or opportunism, but on a genuine recognition of the potential she saw in him. "And I can offer legal consulting," Marcus added. "The kind of projects you're describing require careful navigation through complex regulations." Ethan looked at them with an expression that mixed gratitude and something close to disbelief. In just a few days, he had gone from being ignored and dismissed to having partnership offers from two respected professionals. "Are you serious?" he asked. "Completely," Amanda said with a conviction that surprised her. "I think you have something special and I'd like to be part of it." "I agree," Marcus said. "And besides, I think by working together, we could create something truly meaningful." The possibility of partnership created an energy in the conversation that turned what had started as an apology into a strategic planning session. They began discussing possibilities, resources, and visions for the future that none had considered individually. When they finally parted ways, it was past midnight, and each carried with them a sense that something fundamental had changed. Amanda drove home with a feeling of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Marcus made mental notes about legal research he would need to do to support the projects they had discussed. Ethan walked the streets of the Upper East Side with renewed confidence. The prospect of facing his father the next day was still frightening, but now he knew he wouldn't be alone, regardless of the outcome of that meeting. The next morning, William Collins woke up earlier than usual in his penthouse on the Upper West Side. At 72, he had faced multi-million-dollar negotiations, economic crises, and fierce competition in the real estate market, but nothing had prepared him for the nervousness he felt about the meeting with his son. He spent more time than usual choosing what to wear, an indecision that irritated him. As a businessman, he was known for his ability to make quick and definitive decisions, but this situation was different from anything he had faced professionally. Dr. Coleman had arranged for the meeting to take place in a neutral office, far from both the company and William's residence. The choice of location had been strategic, designed to minimize the intimidation that William's familiar environment could cause. As he got ready, William reflected on the information Dr. Coleman had shared about Ethan. A business administration graduate with excellent grades, volunteer work in underserved communities, no history of trouble or addictions. At least on paper, his son had become exactly the type of man he would respect if he were a stranger. The irony was not lost on him. He had spent years wondering if he had made the right choice by not acknowledging Ethan, and now he discovered the young man had thrived without his influence or resources. The realization was simultaneously proud and painful. Ethan, in turn, woke up in his apartment in Soho with a mixture of anticipation and terror that had kept his sleep irregular all night. He had mentally rehearsed the conversation dozens of times, but he knew no preparation would be enough for the reality of the moment. His mother, Grace, had arrived the night before to support him. Now 52, she had worked tirelessly to give him the best opportunities possible, but had kept the details about his father for over 2 decades. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked, as she made coffee in the small kitchen. "No," Ethan answered honestly, "but I don't think I'll ever be completely ready, and the circumstances won't wait until I feel prepared." Grace nodded, understanding the wisdom in his answer. She had waited for this moment almost as long as he had, carrying the weight of secrets that could finally be revealed. "He was a good man when I knew him," she said carefully. "Young, ambitious, but fundamentally decent. The pressures and choices he faced, well, I hope time has taught him wisdom." "And if he rejects me?" asked Ethan, voicing the fear that had dominated his thoughts. "Then the loss will be his," said Grace with a firmness that brooked no argument. "You are an extraordinary man, with or without his recognition." The confidence in her voice gave Ethan the strength he needed to face the day. He dressed carefully, choosing the same suit he had worn to dinner with Amanda and Marcus the night before. If he was going to meet his father, he would do it presenting the best version of himself. The office where the meeting was scheduled was in Soho, in a discreet commercial building that didn't draw attention. Dr. Amanda had chosen the location specifically for its neutrality, wanting to avoid any psychological advantage that a familiar environment could give to either party. Ethan arrived 15 minutes early, as was his habit, and spent the final minutes before the meeting walking down the hallway trying to calm his nerves. When Dr. Richardson appeared to collect him, his expression was encouraging but serious. "Remember," the lawyer said as they walked to the meeting room, "he is as nervous as you are, perhaps more." The observation surprised Ethan. He had spent so much time imagining his father as a powerful and inaccessible figure that he hadn't considered that the nervousness could be mutual. When the door opened, Ethan saw William Collins for the first time consciously. The man was shorter than he had imagined, with well-groomed grey hair and a posture that showed decades of authority, but also a vulnerability that was visible only to those who knew to look for it. William, in turn, was momentarily speechless upon seeing Ethan. The resemblance was undeniable, not just in physical features, but in the way he moved and in the expression of careful determination that William recognized in himself. "Ethan," William said finally, his voice softer than he had planned. "Mr. Collins," Ethan replied formally, not knowing exactly how to address the man who was simultaneously a stranger and his father. "Doctor." Richardson left them alone after some initial courtesies, understanding that the conversation that needed to happen could not have witnesses. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, but laden with decades of unasked questions and unexpressed feelings. "You look like your mother," William said eventually, offering an observation that was simultaneously personal and safe. "Everyone says that," Ethan replied, "but Dr. Richardson showed me some old photos of you. I think I got your eyes." The reference to the old photos created a tangible connection between them, a recognition that they shared not only DNA, but physical characteristics that connected their identities. "How is Grace?" William asked, and there was genuine concern in his voice. "Well, strong. She never spoke badly of you, if that's what you're wondering," Ethan said, observing the look of relief that crossed his father's face. "She is an extraordinary woman," William said. "One of the most principled people I've ever known." "She is," Ethan agreed, "and she raised me with the same values." The statement was simultaneously an affirmation and a test. Ethan wanted his father to know he had been raised with solid principles, but he was also assessing whether William would value those qualities. "I can see that," William said, and there was genuine pride in his voice. "Dr. Richardson told me about your studies, your volunteer work. You've become exactly the kind of man I would hope my son would be." The validation hit Ethan more deeply than he had expected. Decades of uncertainty about his own qualities and worth were partially resolved with those simple words. "Why did you never—" Ethan began but stopped, realizing the question might be more complex than it seemed. "Why I never acknowledged you," William completed. "Cowardice, social pressure, fear of how it would affect my career and my existing family. Choices that seemed practical at the time, but have haunted me for decades." The brutal honesty of the answer surprised Ethan. He had expected excuses or justifications, not such a direct admission of fault. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Every day," William said without hesitation. "I missed 26 years of your life. I lost the chance to see you grow up, to teach you things, to learn from you. No amount of money or success can make up for that." The emotion in William's voice was genuine and powerful. Ethan realized he was seeing not the powerful businessman he had imagined, but a father who had carried remorse for decades. "What do you want now?" Ethan asked directly. "A chance," William said simply. "An opportunity to get to know my son, to maybe build a relationship, even if it's late. And the chance to finally do the right things." "And your family? Your other children?" "Richard and Elizabeth know about you. They are processing the information. But they are good people, and I believe with time they will accept you as a brother." The conversation continued for over 2 hours, navigating through decades of lost history, unmet expectations, and future possibilities. When it finally ended, both knew that something fundamental had changed, but also that building a real relationship would take time and effort from both sides. "Ethan," William said as they prepared to say goodbye, "I would like you to consider working with me at the company. Not out of family obligation, but because I believe you have perspectives that could help us do better." "What kind of perspectives?" Ethan asked. "Social responsibility, sustainable development. The things Dr. Richardson told me you value. Our company needs to evolve, and I think you could lead that evolution." The offer was tempting, but Ethan knew he needed time to process everything that had happened before making such significant decisions. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course," William said, "but know that regardless of your decision about working with me, you are my son, and that will never change again." When Ethan left the building, he found himself in a world that seemed fundamentally different from the one he had entered, not just because of the conversation with his father, but because of the entire web of relationships and possibilities that had developed over the past few days. Amanda was waiting for him at a nearby cafe, as they had agreed the night before. When she saw him approaching, she immediately noticed that something had changed in his expression. "How did it go?" she asked, studying his face for clues. "Surprisingly well," Ethan said, accepting the cup of coffee she had ordered for him. "He's more human than I expected." "And now?" "Now I have choices to make," Ethan said thoughtfully. "About work, about family, about what kind of future I want to build." Amanda nodded, understanding that he was on the threshold of decisions that would shape the rest of his life. She had spent the morning reflecting on her own choices and had reached some important conclusions. "Ethan, regardless of what you decide about your family, I want you to know that my offer of partnership still stands," she said. "In fact, I spent the morning developing some ideas that I think you'd like to hear." The continuity of her offer was additional validation that Ethan didn't know he needed. The idea that people were interested in working with him for his qualities, not his family connection, was deeply reassuring. "I'd really like to hear your ideas," he said with a genuine smile. As they talked in the cafe, neither of them noticed they were being discreetly observed by Richard Collins, who had been informed about the meeting between Ethan and his father. Richard's expression was complex, mixing curiosity, apprehension, and something that might have been envy. Richard's undetected presence added a layer of complexity to the situation that would soon become significant. The family dynamics Ethan was navigating were more complicated than he had realized, and not all members of the Collins family were as willing as William to accept the changes that his arrival represented. But for now, Ethan and Amanda continued their conversation, unaware of the tensions developing around them, focused on the possibility of building something positive from the unexpected connections that had formed in recent days. The story was about to enter a new phase, where the decisions made in the coming weeks would determine not only Ethan's future, but also the trajectories of all the people whose lives had become intertwined through chance encounters in elevators and honest conversations in discreet cafes. The weeks following the first meeting between Ethan and William were marked by a series of carefully orchestrated family gatherings. Dr. Richardson had recommended a gradual approach, allowing all members of the Collins family to adjust to the new reality at their own pace. The first meeting with Richard took place at the company office, in an environment he considered safe and familiar. At 40 years old, Richard had spent his entire adult life as the apparent heir to his father's real estate empire, and Ethan's arrival represented a fundamental shift in his future expectations. "So you're my half-brother," said Richard when they met, his voice carefully neutral. "It seems so," replied Ethan, acknowledging the underlying tension in Richard's apparent cordiality. The initial conversation was formal and cautious, with both men carefully weighing each other's words and reactions. Richard asked questions about Ethan's education and professional experience, while Ethan tried to show he wasn't interested in creating conflict or disputes. "Father told me you have ideas about social responsibility," Richard said eventually, his voice carrying thinly veiled skepticism. "I have some perspectives on sustainable development," Ethan replied carefully, "but nothing that replaces the experience and knowledge you have of the company." Ethan's diplomatic response surprised Richard, who had expected arrogance or immediate demands for position and power. The genuine humility Ethan displayed began to create small openings in Richard's defensive armor. "What kind of perspectives?" asked Richard. his curiosity beginning to overcome his suspicion. Ethan spent the next hour describing his ideas about how real estate companies could incorporate principles of sustainability and social responsibility without sacrificing profitability. His proposals were well-founded and practical, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of both the technical aspects and the business challenges involved. "Interesting," Richard admitted when Ethan finished. "Some of these ideas could actually work." "I'd like to work with you to develop them further," Ethan offered. "Your experience would be invaluable for turning concepts into reality." The offer of collaboration, rather than competition, was the first real step toward a productive working relationship between the two brothers. Richard began to realize that Ethan wasn't interested in taking his place, but rather in adding value to the family business. The meeting with Elizabeth, William's youngest daughter, was significantly different. At 35, she had chosen a career in architecture instead of directly involving herself in the family business, which gave her a more detached perspective on matters of succession and inheritance. "Finally, I get to meet the secret brother," she said with a smile when they met for lunch. "Father has talked so much about you these past few weeks, I was starting to think you were his invention." Elizabeth's relaxed approach immediately put Ethan at ease. He had prepared for another tense conversation, but instead found an intelligent and straightforward woman who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know him as a person. "What was it like growing up not knowing about us?" she asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice, not judgment. "Lonely at times," admitted Ethan. "My mother did an incredible job raising me, but I always wondered about having siblings, about what it would be like to be part of a bigger family." "Well, now you have siblings," said Elizabeth with simplicity, "and I'll warn you, we're a complicated family, but fundamentally well-intentioned." The naturalness with which she accepted him into the family was deeply comforting to Ethan. Elizabeth didn't seem to see his arrival as a threat or a complication, but simply as a welcome addition to the family dynamic. During lunch, she told stories about growing up as the daughter of William Collins, revealing a more human side of the powerful businessman that Ethan was learning to know as his father. The anecdotes helped Ethan better understand his father's complex personality and the dynamics he had missed by not growing up in the family. "You know Richard is afraid of you," said Elizabeth with her characteristic honesty. "Why?" asked Ethan, genuinely surprised. "Because you're new, smart, and have fresh ideas, and because Daddy talks about you with a pride that Richard never quite managed to earn." The observation revealed complexities in the family relationships that Ethan hadn't considered. He began to understand that his arrival didn't just affect practical matters of inheritance and succession, but also deep emotional dynamics that had developed over decades. "I don't want to create problems," said Ethan. "Too late for that," laughed Elizabeth. "Your existence has already changed everything. The question now is how we all adapt in a way that works for everyone." While these family meetings were happening, Amanda was developing the partnership ideas she had mentioned to Ethan. She had spent weeks researching trends in sustainable development and identifying market opportunities that aligned perfectly with the visions Ethan had shared. Marcus, in turn, was arranging the necessary legal framework for the projects they had discussed. His research revealed that there were significant government incentives available for housing development projects that met specific sustainability and social impact criteria. The three met again to discuss the progress each had made. This time, the meeting took place in Amanda's office, a professional environment that lent seriousness to their discussions. "I have good news," said Marcus, opening a folder of documents. "There's a legal framework that allows for partnerships between private development and social impact that could be perfect for what we're planning. And I've identified 3 specific markets where our ideas would have the most impact," added Amanda, showing a detailed presentation she had prepared. Ethan studied the materials with growing enthusiasm. What had started as conceptual conversations was turning into concrete, viable plans. "This is amazing," he said, "but it's going to need significant investment to be properly implemented." "That's where your family situation becomes relevant," observed Marcus. "With access to the Collins Group's resources, these projects wouldn't just be feasible, they could become models for the entire industry." The observation brought a practical dimension to the family conversations Ethan had been having. It wasn't just about personal relationships, but about how he could use his new position to create meaningful change. "I'll need to talk to my father and Richard," said Ethan thoughtfully. "If we're going to do this, it needs to be something the whole family supports. And we'll be here to help present the proposal," offered Amanda. "It's our project as much as yours." The solidarity they had developed gave Ethan the confidence he needed to approach potentially difficult conversations with his new family. He wasn't just asking for support for his ideas, he was offering a partnership that could benefit everyone involved. The meeting to present the proposal to the Collins family was scheduled for the following week. William had insisted it take place in the company's main conference room, lending official gravitas to the discussions. When the day arrived, Ethan found himself sitting at a polished mahogany table, surrounded by his newly discovered family and the partners he had made in recent weeks. The irony of the situation was not lost on him. Weeks earlier, he had been dismissed in an elevator, and now he was presenting multi-million-dollar business proposals to one of the most influential families in New York City. "Before we begin," said William, "I want everyone to know that this is a meeting among equals. Ethan may be new to the family, but his ideas deserve to be considered on their own merits." William's statement of support created an atmosphere of respect that allowed the presentation to proceed without unnecessary tension. Amanda presented the market research, Marcus explained the legal structures, and Ethan articulated the overall vision that connected all the elements. "What we are proposing," concluded Ethan, "is not just a new type of real estate development, but a new approach to how companies can balance profit with social responsibility." Richard had listened to the presentation with growing attention. His business experience told him that the proposals were not only viable, but potentially very profitable. "The numbers make sense," he admitted, "and the timing could be perfect. The market is moving in the direction of sustainability, and we could be ahead of the curve." "Furthermore," added Elizabeth, "it would be a natural evolution for our company. We've always built to last. Now we can build to sustain." The family's gradual approval gave Ethan a sense of validation that went beyond professional success. He was being accepted not only as a family member, but as a valuable contributor to the legacy they were building together. "There's a personal element to this for me," said William when the formal presentation ended. "I spent decades building a real estate empire, but I always knew I was missing something important. This project represents a chance to build not just buildings, but communities that truly matter. And a chance to do it together," added Ethan, looking around the table at his family and partners. The decision to proceed with the project was made by consensus, but everyone understood that the real work was just beginning. Turning visions into reality would require careful coordination, significant resources, and navigating through complex regulatory and market challenges. In the weeks following the project's approval, Ethan found himself dividing his time between learning the practical aspects of the family business and developing the specific details of his new initiative. Richard became a valuable mentor, sharing decades of experience in real estate development. "One thing you need to understand," said Richard during one of their working sessions, "is that change in our industry happens slowly. You have revolutionary ideas, but implementing them will require patience." "I'm learning that," replied Ethan, "but I think patience is worth it if the results are lasting." Ethan's philosophy of gradual but sustainable progress was becoming an influence on the overall culture of the company. Employees who had worked for the Collins family for years began noticing a different energy in the offices, a feeling that they were working on something bigger than just real estate transactions. Amanda had become a regular presence at the company, working directly with the marketing team to develop strategies that effectively communicated the company's new direction. Her experience in brand positioning was crucial for articulating how the Collins family was evolving its mission. "The challenge," she explained to Ethan during one of their meetings, "is to communicate change without seeming like we're rejecting our past. We want evolution, not revolution." "I agree," said Ethan. "My father built something valuable over decades. I don't want to destroy that, but rather build upon it." Marcus was navigating the more complex legal aspects of the project, including partnerships with community organizations and funding structures that incorporated social goals alongside financial returns. His work was creating precedents that other companies could follow in the future. The first phase of the project was launched 6 months after the initial family meeting. It was a medium-sized housing development that incorporated sustainable technologies, community spaces, and affordable prices for middle-class families. The project would be a test for concepts that could be expanded in future developments. The launch ceremony took place at the construction site, with the Collins family present, along with representatives from the local community and project partners. For Ethan, seeing his vision begin to take physical form was a moment of deep fulfillment. "When I started imagining this project," he said during his speech, "it was just an idea about how we could build differently. Today, seeing the start of construction, I realize we are building more than buildings. We are building a more sustainable and inclusive future." William watched his son speak with evident pride. In just a few months, Ethan had gone from an unknown son to a visionary leader within the company, earning the respect not only of the family, but of the entire organization. After the ceremony, the family gathered for a celebratory dinner. It was the first time everyone was together in a completely relaxed setting, without business agendas or unresolved tensions. "May I make a toast?" said Elizabeth, raising her wine glass. "Of course," replied William. "To families that grow and evolve," she said, looking directly at Ethan, "and to second chances that turn into new beginnings." The toast was met with enthusiasm by all present. Grace, who had been invited to join the celebration, was visibly moved to see her son not only accepted, but celebrated by the family she had known decades before. "Grace," said William, addressing her directly for the first time since she had arrived, "thank you for raising an extraordinary man. You did alone what I should have helped do." "We both did our part," she replied graciously, "and the result speaks for itself." The exchange between William and Grace brought a sense of closure to the situation. Old wounds weren't completely healed, but there was a mutual recognition and respect that allowed everyone to move forward. Amanda and Marcus were also present at the dinner, having become an integral part of the extended family that had formed around the project. For Amanda, the transformation of her relationship with Ethan was particularly significant. "Can I make a confession?" she said during a pause in the conversation. "Of course," replied Ethan. "When we first met in the elevator, I had one of the worst first impressions of my life. And now, a few months later, I can't imagine my professional life without our partnership." "The best relationships sometimes start with misunderstandings," Marcus observed wisely. "What's important is being open to changes in perspective." "And having the humility to admit when we're wrong," Amanda added, looking directly at Ethan. The honesty in the conversation created an intimacy that strengthened all the relationships present. They had become more than business partners or family. They had become a community of people committed to shared goals. As the evening progressed, the conversation naturally turned to future plans. The current project was just the beginning of a much larger vision that could transform how real estate development is done in the United States. "I've been thinking," said Ethan, "that if this project is successful, we could expand the concept to other cities. There are communities across the country that could benefit from this approach." "National expansion is a real possibility," agreed Richard, "especially if we can demonstrate that the model is both socially responsible and financially viable." "And we have the legal structure to support that expansion," added Marcus. "The work we're doing here is setting precedents that will make future projects easier." The conversation about national expansion brought an exciting perspective on the potential reach of their initiatives. What had started as one young man's idea about sustainable development was turning into a national vision for change in the industry. "There's an irony in all this," observed Amanda. "Ethan spent months being treated as if he didn't belong to New York's business circles, and now we're talking about leading national change in the industry. People rarely recognize leaders before they prove their leadership," William said philosophically. "What matters is that Ethan never lost confidence in his visions, even when others couldn't see them. And that he found people willing to support those visions," added Grace, looking around the table with evident gratitude. Grace's recognition of the importance of the community that had formed around Ethan resonated with everyone present. They had learned that great projects aren't accomplished by isolated individuals, but by groups of committed people working together. When dinner ended, everyone felt they had participated in something special. Not just a celebration of professional success, but a recognition of how authentic human relationships can transform both individuals and communities. End of story. So, dear listeners, what did you think of this incredible journey of transformation? Do you believe prejudices can be completely overcome when people open themselves up to truly knowing one another? Share in the comments how you would handle being in Amanda's shoes upon discovering you had judged someone so unfairly. Leave a like if you connected with this story of second chances.